Welcome, everyone. I am System Update, your host, and this is my co host.
Black and white GX, you know the usual. I still don't know what to say, but let's get to it.
All right. So, we're covering, I think this is going to be our second, and I think possibly the final episode for this one, 2109, which is Ken Webster's The Vertical Planes book. Obviously, we know that he stayed in Meta Cottage. And what begins happening, like we said in the last episode, is this computer begins to get random files saved on it. And what we know is that living in Meta Cottage is Ken, his girlfriend at the time, Debbie, and their roommate, John. Well, John moves out as time goes on. I want to say a few months in, he just isn't, vibing with all this. He finds this very uncomfortable. And so he kind of just leaves. Debbie starts to get a little freaked out by all of this, and she rents an apartment not too far from the cottage. Well, what ends up
Mm-hmm.
really getting weird is as these messages and poltergeist things kind of persist, Ken gets a bit frustrated. He doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't know what's going on, and he does get a really weird message from 2109. 2109 actually gives him the name and number of a UFOologist, and it is like, reach out to this person, which is kind of weird. So, rewinding back a little bit, obviously, all we know right now is Ken, Debbie, and John are dealing with this, and they're getting letters from LW. LW is Lucas Wainman. He is, I want to say, a farmer in the 1500s. And what we know about him is that he loses his wife and son in the plague. He uses barley to make ale. And he even talks about making his own cheese. And from what we know, that when he lived there, it was a very humble red stone cabin on a parcel of land. And we even find out as Ken and Debbie are redoing this cottage that they find redstone under the kitchen. And what we didn't know at first is that when they were redoing this cottage, it wasn't just for whatever reason. When they first moved into the cottage, it was very small, quite small. One of the investigators describes the kitchen being like 6 by 6, maybe even 8 by 8 at most, so it was quite small. And so that's how the redstone was found. And even in the letters, LW even mentions his home being made of redstone. As the letters go back and forth, the tone changes a little bit for LW. He starts to think that he's being haunted and broken into. Obviously, because he saw someone ripping up the kitchen, the renovations. And what wasn't really brought or paid attention to when I was watching a lot of these videos and coverage on this was the writing on the walls and floors. So I feel like what was left out was a really big key point, was Ken Webster had sat in his Jaguar outside of the cottage and watched it for about 3, if not 4 hours. He'd locked it completely up, inside and out. And what was going on was during these renovations, someone was writing on the walls and floors and very weird scripture. Everyone described it as beautiful but very eerie. And so he's like, someone in the neighborhood is doing this, which is why they thought someone was pulling a prank on them. And why, for the longest time, everyone over the years has considered this a hoax. But he's like, someone's clearly writing on the walls. They're trying to pull one over or something on me. And so he takes his Jaguar, he parks a bit of ways to just watch the house, and he knows it's completely locked up. So about 3.5 hours go by, and he decides, fuck it. No one's come, so I might as well go inside. He goes inside, and of course, there's writing on the floors. And the construction dude isn't really happy about all of this, obviously. And one of the things that they even find out was like Lucas's writing, like Lucas, LW, all that kind of stuff. And so obviously they take pictures of this. And so yeah, in one of the interviews I watched, there's tons of pictures of the floors, the walls, the writing that they're talking about. And there's even pictures of the cans being stacked. Well, last episode we talked about the fact that there were times when Ken and Debbie and John would go into rooms, or specifically the kitchen mainly. They would go into the room and the cans would be stacked, or the furniture or something would be stacked up. What they didn't tell us was that when they approached the stuff that was stacked, it would fall. So let's say cans were stacking themselves. When he entered the room, they'd all drop. Which is something they didn't really talk about or mention in other videos. Obviously, we find out that LW in his letters, some of the historical facts are wrong. What we later find out is that 2109 is moving around information. They don't want Lucas or Ken to know each other that well. So he skews up some of the historical facts, skews out the name, and continues. And that's what kind of causes a lot of the hoax conversation. But as the letters continue, more of the facts start to get more on point, more correct, more, you know what I mean, on the ball. And obviously we find out LW admits to Ken that he thought he was 2109 or one of 2109's friends. That sparks, even more stuff in Ken. And obviously we know that 2109 isn't very forthcoming when it comes to all of this. This is, if you guys want me to read, I can read a letter off that 2109 gave to Ken. So in the letter, 2109 doesn't even acknowledge John. He acknowledges Peter. Peter is the one that's translating a lot of these letters from Lucas. And this is the option they give Ken, Deb, and Peter. We are sorry that we can only give you two choices. One, that you either have your predicament explained in such a way that you have instant understanding, but what could cause should not happen. Or two, try to understand that you three have a purpose that shall in your lifetime change the face of history. We 2109 must not affect your thoughts directly, but give you some sort of guidance that would allow room for your own destiny. All we can say is that we are all part of the same God, whatever he or it is. And that alone is very fucking eerie. And so Ken starts his own investigation into all this. Debbie is already kind of freaked out. As time goes on with all of this, she kind of gets insomnia in a way. She can't really rest, she can't relax, so she rents an apartment not too far out. Well, one night while they're sleeping at the cabin, there's a bunch of footsteps, and every time they go to look, there's absolutely nothing, but the footsteps can still be heard. And there's even a point where certain parts of the house start to get so cold they can see each other's breath. They would find chalk on the walls more with Lucas's name. They would find, the little footprints like I'd mentioned before, which had 6 toes. And so it just was becoming a little bit, blah, blah, if I could English, it was becoming too much for Debbie. And so as she's staying over there, they give someone permission to essentially come and investigate. That I'm not going to cover right now because I got a lot more information about that I really want to dive into. That's why I've been trying not to skip too much forward, and I probably have been kind of bouncing around. That's only because I'm so excited to get into what else I found. Obviously we find out Deb discovers a ley line on the structure that they're currently living on. And a ley line is something is pretty much an invisible line between two structures that harnesses energy. Well, after this ley line is discovered, Deb begins to get visions and vivid dreams of Lucas. And a lot of ley lines you can find at really big tourist attractions such as Stonehenge. You know what I mean? Very historical, huge impact. There's a huge amount of energy when it comes to Stonehenge. And so as this goes on, they decide, okay, with the vivid dreams and everything, they call upon the SPR. The SPR is called the Society of Psychic Research. They're called HEAVES. SPR sent two researchers. The researchers I have listed, I think, a bit below, but they put Ken and Debbie in two separate rooms. They asked 2109 a set of questions through the computer. They made sure that Ken and Debbie couldn't hear. They made sure Ken and Debbie were separated, didn't have technology. They put in their questions. They waited. And you guys have to remember, these messages are coming within like 5 minutes. So they're coming almost in real time. And so when they check again, 2109 pretty much says, David, John, the title pretty much says David and John. And it goes, David, you interfere with communications. Next time you decide to perform your little experiment, you must be clear from here. We suggest to try someone else to sit with Debbie. Yes, we are what you would call a Tychon universe, but your understanding is incorrect. We ask nothing more than you carry on as you were, and would prefer, as you would prefer, we will have John present. If given, or you may bring another as mentioned. No one, no, it is no concern to us that this is not proved. We will give you plotting of a star next time. We move at a speed so that we cover every point in your time and universe. We have no form. We feed off of heat energy that you will not have heard of. 2109. So they mention a star in this letter. So 2109 actually gives coordinates to a star that we have not discovered. Well, as we know now, when you look at those coordinates, we actually have discovered a star right there in that exact spot. SPR, obviously, when they received that letter, didn't really care for the tone of voice that it had. Didn't really care for the, I want to say, almost snobby-ish response that 2109 kind of gave them. They ended up not believing this whole phenomenon at all. They think that Deb and Ken somehow knew the questions by the typing. These questions were not read aloud. They were not at any point shown to anyone. But they think that Deb and Ken were somehow able to put a very sensitive microphone into that room and that they could decipher what was asked by the typing. I think that's a really far reach, if I'm honest. Like, I don't foresee Ken and Deb having some type of military-based microphone or some shit to listen in on a keyboard. Like, especially when computers at the time were very new. Ken even tried to convince them and brought a witness named Frank Davis. And when they brought Frank Davis in to try to, appeal to them, he even said that for 3 minutes, the room felt ice cold before it finally went normal. Well, after they realized that they weren't going to get anywhere, they had tea in the kitchen and decided, okay, let's just go and check out the computer. And then here, lo and behold, there was a new message. And it's from someone named John claiming that Lucas had been arrested. Which, crazy. He'd been arrested for witchcraft. And one thing about this whole thing is, when you're arrested in witchcraft back then, it was very serious. It was a hardcore, offense. Getting out of it is quite difficult. Well, all they could really do and figure out was fear. So they said to, Lucas's friend, tell, the sheriff that if he doesn't release Lucas, we're going to send our witchcraft after him. And somehow, lo and behold, that works. The magic box threatens the sheriff. The sheriff's like, you know what, here's your guy. And the sheriff's name was not really mentioned, but if I remember correctly, they didn't mention it because at that moment they had known it was a fake name, and it's brought up again towards the end of the documentary I was watching. And once Lucas is out of jail, they start to ask Lucas a little bit more questions. They start to talk to him a bit more because they feel like after he'd been arrested that they'd kind of been a bit closer, or at least had grown a bit closer after the whole thing. I mean, they had obviously got him out. So after a couple questions, Lucas kind of responds and he's like, I'm not the one moving stuff. He was actually assuming that they were the one moving stuff because he was going through the same exact thing. And so they both come to the conclusion that it might be 2109. 2109 had even told them not to give each other information about each other. So instead, Lucas tells Ken, leave a pen and paper on top of the computer. And sure enough, the next day when Ken found the pen and paper, it was signed Thomas, not Lucas. Thomas admits in the letter that he did this in fear of being accused of witchcraft, which had already come to pass. And he even said that he left clues of his name in passing, especially when he mentioned a friend's name. Not of his friend, but Ken's friend. He said that a friend named Peter, whose house was named English. I cannot English today. I'm so sorry, you guys. This is gonna be a nightmare to edit. Ooh, it looks like my co-host stood up for a second. This is gonna be a nightmare to edit for me. I'm so sorry, y'all. But
Piggybacking off real quickly. I remember you said the writing, and I did a little bit more research this time. The writing was in chalk, right?
yes.
And the thing, I don't know why my brain thought this instantly as soon as I heard that. Why specifically chalk out of everything that, could have been written with? And why are all of the objects being tampered with? Why are there footsteps, And I tried to figure that part out, and the more I tried to find out, the more confusing it got. However, you might jump out of your seat for this. So I also found out that I found the computer's whereabouts.
Oh.
And it is still there, and they turned the place into a bit of an exhibit.
Okay, so they let him keep the computer.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody lives there. The place is just an exhibit.
Okay,
so people can only go there.
Okay, I definitely think I might want to go one day because that sounds amazing. I mean, to see the computer itself would be, I think pretty awesome.
However, I found out that you also cannot type on it or nothing. They treat that computer like it's the Annabelle doll, so...
I mean, that's pretty valid. But I'm going to be honest. With all the research I've been doing, especially today, even if I think anyone wrote a letter, whether it would be Ken or anyone on that computer, I don't think we'd get a response. Because I found some really interesting information that I think you're really going to like.
Ooh. Let's hear it.
So, as I was saying, he did leave hints. He had mentioned someone named Peter whose house was by the Hardin School. Well, Lucas Wayneman, who we thought was communicating with Ken this whole time, is actually Thomas Hardin. He was a fellow at Breast Mills College, and 2109 was upset by all of this. He was very upset, especially about the computer being moved. So one thing's for sure, in my research I found a lot of this energy and poltergeist and letters, they were all coming from the kitchen area. So a lot of the energy was coming from the kitchen. Well, the computer was moved to the bathroom. And with chalk there was written, one more chance, measure frequency by +2 energy. What else other than sound and light? And I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that. That's a little creepy. And
Right.
not even soon after that, they got a letter from 2109. And it reads as said, Ken, Deb, Peter, we have reason to believe you have Man's true name. You must say so we can rectify the problem immediately before it's accepted. 2109. That's a little weird. Rectify what problem? Why don't they want them to know about Thomas Harwoodin so badly? After more discussion, they realized 2109 rewrote and changed a lot more than just the messages. They were dying to, find more obscure details. Obviously, most had lost interest in this whole investigation or hoax. The SPR had completely lost interest. They had even spoken to a newspaper saying this was just a good hoax and nothing more than that. But what I found to be weird is that when Ken called the SPR to get the files about the investigation, they told him that John Buchtel, one of the investigators, had essentially gone missing for a little while, or just wasn't there, doesn't exist right now. And the other one named David Welsh, apparently had never worked there or didn't exist. That's a bit weird. And then on top of that, the SPR also said that this investigation never existed.
What?
Yeah. That this never happened. That they have no idea what he's talking about. This investigation had not happened.
Okay, the investigation didn't happen, even though So
even though they're on
obviously
record
they're
saying this is just
sneaking
a hoax.
Yeah, so that means that they know something went down, but they're trying to sweep it under the rug.
That, or they're a little freaked out by how... I mean, I don't know. I'd be a little freaked out if I had 300 pages worth of evidence in my face. There's over 300 letters to Ken and Deb.
Oh boy.
And obviously 2109 is becoming more aware of Ken's frustration and decided to contact him with a name. Yes, 2109 is like, you know what? I see you're a little mad. I see you're a little frustrated. Here's some information. So here's the letter read as so. We ask you to do the following. There is a brilliant researcher, a ufologist. We know you don't like the word. His name is Gary Rowe. His ideas differ somewhat to yours, but nevertheless, he can help you with a couple of your problems. You may phone him with the number below and invite him to talk with you. When he comes, show him this and ask him what he makes sense of it. Peter must do the telephoning. Tell him you got his telephone from a UFO enthusiast, 2109.
That right there almost answers everything. That, like, dead ass.
It definitely gives you, like, okay. So, about this person, There's someone who actually did an interview with him last year. Um, and apparently, I'm gonna read you the rest of my notes so that we can talk about that, because it really, he gives more information that but as I'm listening to him, I'm like, okay, we really don't need to know this, but it actually answered a lot of questions that I had without realizing it. But here as things go. Gary had written a letter and sealed it on a computer. He would wait and then it'd be printed out and I guess sealed and given to him. What people did not know was that in order to make sure that these letters were untouched and stayed sealed when Gary wasn't around, he had done a very interesting thing. He'd put a piece of film paper into it. So at his house, no one knew that he had a black room for photography, of course. And so he put a piece of that paper in there. This way, if it's exposed to light or if it's exposed to anything, he would know. Absolutely no one knew this. And so when he would retrieve the sealed envelopes and then go home, he'd go into that black room and open them, and they were always, every single time, unopened. But he was getting responses. But one other thing that he added was his responses at first weren't on pen and paper. It first started out on the computer. And then 2109 told him to start leaving the letters. But he one-upped it. He added a for sure closure that no one was gonna be able to open it without there being some kind of proof. And not only that, Gary is also one of the first people in the world to conduct this type of investigation using computers. Because he had set up monitors all throughout the house, like sensors, that if any window or door or something opened, he would know.
Right.
And so it was the first one in the world like that. And he talks about this in that video. And as things go on, obviously, every single conversation that Gary is having with 2109 is private. Ken has no idea what any of these letters say. He's not getting any responses. He's not getting any answers to his questions. And it finally gets to a point where Gary wrote a letter and he just was never seen again. At least not to Debbie and Ken. It goes, "Greetings. I am instructed to apologize, but in any event, I would have done so of my own volition. This letter will there will be a letter hopefully this weekend. I am also instructed to apologize to Ken and Debbie. I must try to answer your last letter. It would appear that you are more important than I realized in the scheme of things. Gary."
Hello.
Gary had even become very secretive with his with his communications. He never told anyone anything. He never said anything. All of that. And it literally caused such a blow up. Obviously, Ken and Deb and them never spoke again. He did emerge years later, going to UFO cons and things like that, talking about his experience. And I think one of these was in Scotland in 2021. And he says he sees 2109's hand in everything. He almost describes it as 2109 being close as to like God, essentially. He doesn't say this in his own words, but the way he describes it is that 2109 knew so much about him and things about him that no one outside of him knew, and things he wouldn't discover until years later about himself. It was terrifying to him. He on his life, he swears that this is a real thing. He does not believe this is a hoax. Um,
Right.
and so as we learn more about everything, Lucas does say that, obviously we know him now as Thomas. Thomas does say that a green light appeared in his fireplace. A man stepped out and asked him to not be afraid, and he left Lucas, and to not be afraid, and he left. Lucas, that we now know as Thomas, found a light box after in his kitchen, which is where Ken and Debbie keep their computer. When he spoke, the light box lit up and would write out his words, and it appeared in glowing green letters. And in March 21st in 1985, Lucas would send his final message. So this is about a year. This is about 300 messages. This is about a year's worth of, data, essentially. And this
Right.
goes as followed. My true fellows and sweet maid, Grosvenor has said that Thomas must go. I know it's for the best because the people of Dodalson are very wary of me. It is good to know all will change. That there are true men to follow like Ken and Peter. Though 400 years is a long time to mankind, you can come to Oxford. Now I know there is no danger for me there. I hear that the king is very sick and all is quiet in the church. I shall go by boat from Cheshire to Bristol. I shall try to make my stay at Brasenose. I will write my book about my brothers and maid and the end of Lucas and their love for one another. One day you will all sit down at my table for wine and mead by the river in Oxford, while we shall read each other's books and laugh. We shall speak of truth and good men, watching Oxford change forevermore. In your time my book is old, but I shall not go to my God until it's written. Then we will be truly embraced. My love to you all. I shall wait for you in Oxford. Thomas Harwarden. Obviously, they developed a great friendship. They developed a closeness. And I won't lie.
Right.
I do think the way that he talks about Debbie, he grew quite close to Debbie. This man lost his wife, his son, and now he has these haunting dreams of a beautiful woman 400 years later. I'm just saying. Maybe it's just how they wrote back then, but it does sound like he has a bit of a fondness for her. But not only that, but he has a fondness for all of them. He thinks that they're all great intellects. And obviously, with Thomas gone, 2109 sends his final message. It goes, 2109. There is another person to come. They will have the help we need. You will know when they come. Thomas did eventually write his book, and he soon died shortly after. He placed it in a secure place. It shouldn't take many years to find it. Though he wrote it in Latin with the help of a friend that he met in Oxford, the inscription reads, Me writes this with the hope that mine friends will one day find this book. Then may our lands be not so distant. We will finish now. Oh my God, English. It goes, me writes this with the hope that my friends will one day find this book. Then may our lands be not so distant. And that's the end of the inscription. And 2109 continues on in the letter to say, we will finish now. You will have a lot of work to do. There is no need to write back as we will have gone. Thank you for your cooperation. 2109. Over 300 messages were sent. And obviously, we know that Peter Trinder was the translator. We know that Ken Webster was a person that was dealing with this. Debbie Oak is the full name of Debbie, by the way. I did find her last name, Oak. Was in this, and now we know Gary Rowe. One thing about Gary is he swears that he sees 2109 everywhere. And he even says that weeks later, after this whole ordeal, that he had looked at his back one day when he was coming out the shower and seen markings and even the letter, even the, not the letters, the numbers 2109 bruised into his back. And not only that, he still has his letters from 2109 and has not said a single word because he told 2109 he would keep his secret until he told him it was time. And he says he's a man of his word. And one thing that he knew about Gary that no one else knew was that Gary has a thing about a specific number that coordinates with him. I can't remember the word that he used or what type it was called, but it was the number 7. When the year that he was born has a 7 in it, the month he was born has a 7 in it. His name Gary is a number 7. His middle name is the number 7. There's even as a little fun fact, there is an error in the Vertical Planes book that there's 2 chapter 7s. There's chapter 7, and then after chapter 22, there's another chapter 7.
Okay, that's weird.
And then on top of that, the page that the second chapter 7 is on is, I think, page 25, which he says is a number 7 when you're going by numerology. Which I do want to point out, we're in the year 2025, which would be a 7 because of 25. And he even says that everything good or bad that's ever happened to him has ended or started with the number 7.
That's weird. That's weird. Very, very, very weird. I don't even know what to say about that.
Exactly. And he talks about that. He brings it up. He brings up the fact that 2109 brings things up, and to him specifically, that no one would have known. And obviously, not only that, 2109 told Ken when a mathematical theory would be solved in his lifetime, and it was, I want to say, almost a decade later. He told them a coordinates to a star that we discovered, and we did discover said fucking star to the exact coordinate. And he even told Gary, which Gary does admit in his interview, that this experiment would be coming to an end soon. And that communications would be done. So there's a lot more that Gary knows than he's letting on to. And he says that the Vertical Planes book is a very accurate and I think thorough source of everything that happened. And I do plan on getting physical copies of the book, 2 copies, one to read and one to highlight in, obviously. But yeah, that's the doodles and messages.
See, the thing that bothers me about this whole scenario is mainly like I feel like there's more to it at some point. How deep does this rabbit hole go? And again, and here's my small opinion on this. I feel like 2109 still exists, but somewhere else now. Kind of like under like a new alias or something, you know?
Well, here's the thing. As this interview was happening, one of the interviewers is saying something, and he goes, the timer on whatever just went from 25 to 7. And literally the dude looks at the camera and he smiles and he goes, I told you. 2109 shows his hand, even if it's a little obvious right now. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean by that? So he does say 2109 is around and still does exist. And he believes that 2109 isn't a single person. The way he talks about 2109 is like as if he still talks to 2109. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And I so badly want you to see this interview. Like, I swear to God, even after this, I kind of do want you to watch it with me. But, like, I feel like it makes me ask a lot more questions than it did to answer any. Because the way he talks is like, he knows something. And he loves that he can't tell us. He loves it. He's like, I'm just waiting for when I can. Because he goes, I'm sitting on something big. And I'm like, say it. Just say it. What will 2109 even do? Because when is the time going to happen? I mean, it's been over 40 years. So, I don't know. My guess right now is in the next 2, maybe year and a half, I think something's going to happen. I think the book's either going to be found, 2109 is going to come that, or put out that message. I don't know. We might still have to do a 3rd episode where I make you watch everything and just let you talk about what you think. Because there's a ton of stuff that I really feel like I don't get to like give you the full grasp because you haven't seen it. Like there's so much information out there, and I am gonna tag it all in the video, all in the description below of the video. But I don't know. There's so much about it, and everyone's like, that's it. That's all about the Doodleson messages. And I genuinely wouldn't know what to say more than what we've talked about right now. But I don't think I'm done looking into it. I think this is my done of covering it. But I do think we will probably have a future episode where we do talk about this again, for sure. Because I don't think we're done with just here yet. You know what I mean?
Right, and me personally, the fact that there's a lot, like, going on with this, I like the evolution of, like, the more we found out about, like, going through these episodes, this series, and I went from starting from, like, okay, so most likely it's AI, or most likely it's AI from the future, and right now, it's kind of like, me personally, I feel more so it's more sci-fi, like in an alien category kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because there's so many nods to, like, these, like, aliens, like, throughout, like, this whole thing.
And not only that, why call upon a UFOologist in the first place? And even Gary himself says that he doesn't consider himself a ufologist. He goes, that's not what I'm known for. He goes, I investigate mysteries. He goes, I've always investigated. But he goes, I would have never really called myself a UFOologist.
Exactly. And the bonus out there is that, someone could be going through a very similar situation right now with the whole Ken Webster situation that nobody knows about yet. It could be happening to multiple people. It could be happening to, because that's the thing, because, like, 2109 is still out there somewhere. they're probably tampering with someone else's, like, hardware or phone or whatever. And since technology is so, like, prominent these days, it can happen to literally anyone right now as we speak.
But I mean, not even imagine that. So imagine that cottage is a ley line. Imagine everyone that's visiting
Right?
with their cell phones. So what's to say if I don't stand in that one corner, go to Chat GBT and type in 2109, are you here?
Right. Or, like, what if 2109 is, like, being brought up as Connor, like you brought up in that first episode of this? That's what I'm
Oh,
thinking.
Conrad.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. So I won't lie, I was very upset that the TikToker didn't continue the experiment. She said that she did the experiment, she got the results she wanted and needed, and that was it. But I feel like there's so much more. Why just stop at
Right.
that? Why not have you teased this inkling of Conrad being hacked by 2109? Why didn't you go further? If you saw the little like lining up, and it makes me wonder if it was just because she wasn't supposed to be the person.
Right. And that's the disturbing part on how, like, again, that goes back to the point that's living proof that 2109 is still out there.
But yeah, that's what we have on the Dodals and Messages. And that's all I have left on it. Is there anything else you would like to say about it, GX?
I would like to say, like, one final thing. Um, I have a feeling that,
Mm-hmm.
um, as far as this whole situation is going, I feel like it hasn't ended as far
Mm-hmm.
as for the whole Webster situation. And I personally feel like the longer we wait, the more we'll uncover. But I also feel like, do we even want to nowhere and bite humanity in the ass?
But what if it doesn't bite? What if it ends up being better?
And if it ends up being better, then that's a good thing. And I know there's gonna be some brave people out there that are gonna, like, can, like, do their own Chat GPT Conrad, like, test, you know.
Oh yeah. I have
So
thought
I
about
feel
it.
like we're in the era for everything to actually fall into place, especially since everything they said was gonna happen happened.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, whatever happens, I don't want to be there when it happens. Just in case.
Well, I'm confused because it's terrifying. We don't really know anything
Yeah.
about 2109, but yet we know too much.
At the same time, I don't think 2109 wants us to know. They leave on breadcrumbs just as much for us to follow, but not enough to, like, for us to get the full picture, because they have a bigger plan, bigger than anything that we already know today. So, and if we're talking about something that is tied to aliens, it's going to hurt our wee little mushy human brains.
I mean, I don't know. What if this whole thing is like an alien thing?
And
Like just
that
aliens
part,
playing games, and we're all just like, what the fuck?
if we end up finding this was just a prank from the aliens, I'm not gonna laugh.
I'd be really impressed, honestly. I'd be like, honestly, slay. But yeah, this was Flowerpuff Podcast. I'm System Update, and this is.
Black and White GX, stay glitched.
And we shall see you guys next time.